are still joining in, Christine, you do have to basically get Fazreen or anyone else to log back to first session to ask people to join these second sessions.
Are you able to see my screen?
I can, yes. I can see your screen. All right, Alan, looking good. I think people will start basically coming in on board now. We're calling people to join. Let us wait for a couple of minutes. Are you in the office or you actually work from home today, Ajay?
I'm actually working from the office.
Ooh, naughty.
Today is our scheduled leaf blower, workabout around the building. So I thought not a good idea to, present from the home.
I guess you're lucky. Singapore don't have this restriction that you are not allowed, right? Because KL, there is a restriction that you're not allowed to go to the office.
Okay.
Good morning, Bruno. Once you basically start to share the slides, you'll be able to see more clearly. Right now, it's just on display. That's hence, But you could also basically go to your left-hand side. There's 3 little bar there. If you click on it, there's a setting and choose 720p instead of auto. Then you'll be able to view the slide better in that way. So let's just, when we basically start the presentation, I'll be off. We'll see how, I will be off the screen, then you'll be able to see the presentations. If there's a continued problem, we'll fix it straight away. Again, we're just going to wait for a few more minutes. Okay, we do have almost, Ajay, you're very popular. We have about 80 plus people joining your second session right now. That's basically, good morning, Nisha, from the FSB, thank you. So let's just basically start this particular session. This session is run by, and also contributed by Beyond Trust, and the presenter today is Ajay Kumar. Ajay, we talked a few days ago, and I believe that you spent the last 15 years primarily on the access identity, access management, especially privilege access, as well as involve your career in cybersecurity within the Asia Pacific and Japan market. I won't go through the detail. I think a lot of people could read your bio from the slide that we shared today. So the sessions today is about security, your remote access, which is very important because I believe almost 80% of the people in the world are now have to work from home, except you, Ajay. You're being very naughty. You have to. I'm joking. But without further ado, I'll pass it back on to you. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, you can go to the Ask Questions button, or you can just type something, say something nice, chat column. Feel free to email us as well. We will answer all the questions when Ajay finishes presentations. Go ahead, Ajay, back to you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for the kind introduction. And good morning, everyone. Pleasure to talk to all of you today morning. And this is what I have in the agenda. We'll do a quick introduction. I'll talk about COVID-19, not the medical aspects, but more in terms of how it's impacting all of us in the security or information security business. Uh, I'm talking about, what are the challenges that typical organizations have when they look at, moving from an on-prem model to, now having to support or give access to people who need to work from their homes. Uh, Look at what are the key security consideration that you as an IT security manager need to, think through. And I'm going to talk about some of the key questions that each one needs to ask before they, identify or shortlist a solution. And finally, I'm going to talk about a Beyond Trust solution for secure remote access, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about the current situation. This is pretty much a once in a lifetime event for most of us, and most organizations wouldn't have, planned for an eventuality such as COVID-19. One of the big challenges is that traditionally companies has always been, work from an office model with a limited number of people having to work from, on the field. And these are restricted to your sales, or maybe if you're, a futurist enough, some of your developers and so on. But we always had a set of people, critical people who needed to work from the office to, manage the day-to-day office work and, organizational issues. Most organizations, therefore, never had or built the kind of remote working infrastructure that they require. Now, with this COVID-19, we are looking for an forced model where most organizations have to look at having most of their employees work from a remote location. Now, this has its own challenges. Network, especially the remote access part of the network, is something that has never been set up for supporting all of your employees. A lot of your applications are expected to have a on-prem model, or expect the offices people to be be on or working from office, either for security reasons or because these are legacy applications that they lack the remote access paradigm. And your entire support infrastructure is also set up for you're supporting your employees sitting in office itself. Now, as you're trying to go through this entire process, we all have a sense or innate sense of urgency when it comes to self-preservation, and COVID-19 is something that brings that in all of us. We want to keep our family safe, and we are always looking for the latest information in this evolving situation uh, around us today. So anything that comes that gives us a piece of information is typically accepted, and not only you click through. And that brings its own challenges, especially when you have a lot of malicious elements who are trying to exploit this crisis. In fact, the World Health Organization has issued multiple reports of hackers trying to exploit as a part of the COVID-19 related scams or phishing attempts. Now we at Beyond Trust, and I had a chance to talk to our CISO, and we have been lucky enough, and having tools that support this model. And we're going to talk a little bit also on in terms of our experience in terms of having deployed this. Now let's look at some of the challenges, right? A sense of urgency, the ability, and you have a desire to know, better about a certain situation is when you're also a target of a lot of malicious, elements. And this is exactly where, we have, phishing mail campaigns that, tends to give us information about the latest, outbreak, especially around your region. Maybe, they're talking about a map has happened, an Android malware that purported itself to be a evolving map that gave you information about infections that were nearby. Some of the scams that are already been seen in existence, and unfortunately, a lot of people have fallen prey to these issues, and thereby also compromised their organizational security. Now, as we go into this remote working mode, right, in a way, a forced mode of working from remote, what are the security considerations that you need to take into view? Of course, let's look at some of the objectives that you would have, in order to, ensure that your employees have secure access, while, you are ensuring the security and compliance of that access paradigm. Of course, the scope today is varied. Organizations have invested heavily in the cloud, on mobile technologies, and today we have an organization that needs to support their applications which are on-prem, partly on the cloud, and also with a multi-cloud paradigm, which always has been planned or has been designed, secured from access from within your organization, typically with a mechanism such as a site to site VPN or a site to cloud VPN mechanisms. Now, from a support perspective, as you go into this new mode of working, people need to connect their devices. Typically, these are their personal devices. They need to install applications on their devices. They need to be able to set up the connectivity to your network, right? And these are when they run into a lot of issues. And these is when again your help desk or your support personnel need to be able to connect back into the system and be able to support them securely. Also, we have a big challenge of your privileged users. These are your administrators. Traditionally, they have always been sitting in your office and supporting your infrastructure. But now we have to look at how they can support your IT and keep the lights running in your IT department, especially when they are working from home or outside your organization. Now let's look at a typical attack chain, and this is something a lot of you would be familiar with. You would have three stages in the typical attack chain, right? You would have the first stage that's called as infiltration. Traditionally, these have been, the internal threats, people who are malicious, or people, who have been, ignorant and click on, a malicious, email or, false victim to an phishing campaign. And of course, there are external threats. Now, once they're within your organization, your there's a mechanism of propagation where they look at trying to capture some privilege escalation or get your admin IDs and then move to your organization, identifying select targets and data that they can collect and then exfiltrate. Right. This has been the traditional model. Now, COVID-19 puts your trusted person who has always been within your organization now outside, which means that this traditional way of securing or uh, you know evaluating the person's behavior now has changed. We need to have them being access to your enterprise using unmanaged assets outside the traditional security parameter. And this is exactly where a lot of attackers are trying to take advantage or seek advantage of this scenario. Now, what are the considerations that you need to keep in mind when you are having to move into a remote working mode? The primary thing is bring your own device. Very rarely we have seen organization with enough assets or spare assets that they can hand over laptops or additional assets onto their employees so that they can now work from home. With that being the case, the preferred approach with a lot of organizations has been to ask their employees to use their home computer or their home assets to connect back into the enterprise. Now this is traditionally not something that IT has been geared up for. VPN has always been set up where you're connecting your the user has been connecting to your enterprise using a hardened company issued laptops, the security mechanisms in place. Now when you connecting to your VPN using and bring your own device or a home laptop which is maybe shared, you're opening yourself for a whole lot of risk. VPN unfortunately gives access to a whole lot your network. It doesn't have an ability to give uh, or a controlled access to a limited set or only to the applications that a user needs access to. Now this brings its own challenges, right? Now you're having an environment where a user traditionally has been just given access to two or three systems or had a visibility of two or three systems within this network, now has an access to a broader network. Now in case his computer is compromised, you run the risk of an hacker or a malware now also having to unmitigated access to your network. Let's look at the second consideration. And this is something that is very critical because a lot of organizations have, certain compliance drivers, especially if you're in one of the regulated industries, healthcare, finance, or anything with is associated with critical infrastructure. One of the key mandates of any such compliance is to secure access to what we call as personal identifiable information, PII, or your customer identifiable information. And these mandates keep changing, and all of us in the IT security field are constantly audited. And not being able to comply means hefty fines and compromise of your security. So it's very critical to see how this data is being accessed from a remote location. You need to be having auditability as well as an ability to clearly identify the business justification of why this access is being carried out by the user. So the third consideration that you need to take is shadow IT. Now, when an organization suddenly moves to accessing from remote, they're typically not geared up. The IT teams are not geared up, but a business or a user is measured by his productivity, and they typically find ways of ensuring that they can get their job. Often it means leveraging free tools that are available, and these are tools that may not necessarily have the monitoring or the authentication or the various security measures that the enterprise standards measure up to. And that's the reason when these tools when they're used by users for carrying out their day-to-day tasks, it becomes very, very difficult for an IT security personnel to track the access, see how data moves, especially when they're using certain cloud-based or using certain open tools that may be shared by multiple people on the cloud. And this could lead to a whole lot of compliance issues and sometimes even compliance fines, right? Uh, Basically, having an shadow IT, or where your users are using all of these tools, lead to a whole lot of challenges in management, auditability, as well as being able to track the usage. The last is most critical. Now, the recent studies have said one of the biggest attack vector is remote access by privileged users. Now, the privileged users traditionally, by nature of their jobs, need to have access, especially admin access, to a whole lot of systems within your organizations. Now, when these privileged users are accessing your systems from a home computer that may not be fully secured or may have malware, they are victim to what is called as credential stealing attacks. And these credentials can be then used by your, by the attacker to get access to your enterprise. Now, the first step, and if you're going back to the attack model that you saw, one of the first step that most hackers try to do once again access or footstep into any device is try to escalate their privileges. But when they have gained access to systems that are run by administrators, they already have an access to a whole lot of admin IDs or credentials for a lot part of your enterprise network and assets. And this, leads to a very, very huge impact in terms of compromising your assets as well as, leading to data leakage. With, phishing and spear phishing that campaigns that are going on, it is not uncommon for even, trained, security personnel to fall victim and, thereby bringing your entire organization into a risk. Now, as we go into this journey, what are some of the questions that you need to be asking when expanding to your remote workforce? So let's look at the first question. One of the basic principles of security is what we call as principle of least privilege. The idea that each one of your employees is given exact access to the applications and systems that he needs access to, and nothing more. And second, being able to have that audited and reported with a clear management trail in terms of who has approved that access. The first question that you need to see is, can you set granular access? Can you ensure that employees, when they're working remotely, are given access to exactly the same systems that they would have access to when they're working? Unfortunately, a whole lot of tools gives you a broad set of access that doesn't meet this requirement. Second is, do you have a single path of approvals and notification? One of the standard requirement is to have business justification for your access, and typically that is done by being able to track a management approval or a management justification for an access to a given system. It's very critical that you have a mechanism to ensure that all the access to your systems, especially when it's being from remote, has an approval trail and the ability to track management approval. Next, do you need to know where your access is being accessed from, whom, and for what purpose? Right now, this is a very basic requirement. But unfortunately, when you're using certain tools, or when you're using tools that are built available freely on the cloud, this is not very easy to track. You may see access from various unknown cloud networks. Since this is something that has been set by a user, it's very difficult for you to track or block or set up a standard network policy against. Again, the ability to have the proper management overview is would be missing. The next question that you need to ask is, what are the privileged credentials your employees or vendors are using. Now these, the vendor access is something that is very critical. Most organizations require to have vendors access certain systems, especially for troubleshooting, or for maybe for installation or update of certain critical systems that the local IT team may need help with, in which case credentials needs to be shared with these vendors so that they can connect to your network and then access the systems. Uh, More often than not, these credentials once shared tend to be exist or be valid for a certain period of time, which means that anyone stealing these credentials gets the same level of access, thereby bringing a lot of security risk onto your organization. What is very essential is that these credentials should be centrally managed. Ideally, you would want to have a scenario where the credentials are injected automatically or managed automatically by your tool. Uh, and if possible, rotated immediately after every session or use to mitigate any kind of misuse of the credentials. And last, how are you able to capture the detailed session data for real time, or for a post session review and compliance? Now, what you are looking for is, you would want to know who is accessing the systems, when they are accessing, what are the critical assets that are being that these users are using, and finally, you want to know what are the activities that are being carried out by those users by during that access. And this gives you a good audit trail, so that either as a post event or even during in real time, you can quickly audit or evaluate a person's access and see whether this is in line with the business requirement. And these are some the challenges that a lot of organizations face, and these are some of the situations that you need to evaluate before you grant a remote access. Now let's talk a little bit of how we at Beyond Trust, are able to manage secure remote access. Now we have been a little lucky in this scenario because we had a tool that provides this secure remote access. And when we had a situation when a lot of our office workers needed to now suddenly work from remote, we could quickly spin up an instance on the cloud and ensure that people could access their PC and continue working as before. Similarly, for looking at scenarios where we had our help desk, we could ensure that our help desk could also securely access the on-field personnel and provide support as required. Now, from a secure remote access, we talked about the various requirement. Right now, two key use cases always comes into mind. One, you want your IT or your support help desk to be able to provide remote support. Basically, be able to provide a secure, reliable remote support to your end users and your customers, regardless of where they are. And our solution provides us these both paradigms, allows you to provide support remotely, as well as provides a secure channel for your vendors as well as your administrators to connect back to the network and carry out their day-to-day tasks, all the while ensuring you have auditability, you have complete visibility into their activities, as well as being able to provide them very granular access. So when you're looking at remote use cases, let's look at what are the use cases that most of our customers or even we face on a day-to-day basis. The most challenging one has always been having to now support your users' desktop and devices, regardless of where they are. And The challenge always is that when you're going into BYOD mode, people tend to have a whole plethora of systems, especially it's not very uncommon for people to have Windows systems that are not supported, like Windows 7, for example. They may have various variants of Linux or Mac. Some of them again which are may not be supported, and a lot of people in today's day also prefer to work using either their personal devices like iPad or an Android tablet. Chromebooks is also something that is very popular. Now, having to support this wild variety of devices, some of them which may no longer be supported by the vendor, is something that is one of the key use cases that we are seeing. Second, you need to be able to access these devices regardless of where you are. Now we have two kinds of support use cases that we traditionally see. One is what we call as end user support. Now these are support cases where a user calls up and says that he has an issue with an application or using of his device. In which case you need to securely access remotely these systems, be able to quickly troubleshoot and help them with setting things right. The second, even more challenging one, is being able to connect back into your servers and network devices back on-prem that may require you to manage or maintain or configure. And while doing this, you also want to ensure that your management is aware of the activities, especially around key metrics for your support or service, as well as ensure what are the whether the entire remote access is in line with your normal support SLAs or your organizational requirements. And last, but very key, is ensuring compliance mandate. Now, all of these activities, regardless of whether they are now being done from a remote, still needs to comply to all of your security mandates. You need to be able to report back in terms of who accessed the systems, when this access was carried out, and the business justification behind this access, all with an audit trail or all session activities. These are some of the key use cases that we see, and these are something that I'm happy to say is something our remote support and privileged remote access support. Uh, and in interest, we have for a limited time provided our customers as well as enterprises an ability to evaluate or try out these products for 90 days to meet up their immediate challenges. Both the remote support as well as the privileged remote access can be accessed by going to the URL that you can see on the screen. This provides you a full version for up to 5 users to connect back into your enterprise. Both on-prem as well as the cloud-based models are available as a part of these evaluation. With that, let me just hand it over to Jeffrey for any questions that you might have at this point.
Well, thank you, Ajay. Thank you so much for the presentations. Now we're taking questions. We do have a couple of questions coming in, so I'm just going to wait for 10 seconds because I need to read it out. Ladies and gentlemen, participant for this particular webinar, please feel free to ask any questions that are asked questions, or you can actually just simply type it in the chat box that right now says something nice. All right, so the first questions that came in is that my employee are locked down in different country. This happened right now, okay? How can they set this infrastructure up without being on premises? So, for example, I can't do my office, none of my Malaysian colleagues can. So how do they utilize this?
A very good question, Jeffrey. And this is exactly the question a whole lot of our customers are asking us, right? With the ability to go back to your office is very much restricted. Setting up some new infrastructure on-prem has become a big challenge. What we offer is a cloud-based variant of both the remote access and privileged remote access that allows us to quickly spin up this solution so that your users can now start using it and connecting back into your enterprise securely.
Okay. Second question coming in is, does VPN, I mean, a lot of people are working from home now, or sometimes they're not even working from home in a hotel because they're quarantined. So what are some of the risks that using VPN on home computer or in a, I guess, public network?
Again, a very good question. See, VPN has traditionally been meant for employees to access their network from a secured device, right? These are typically your company issued laptops that have, all the security measures, such as having, anti-malware, maybe other hardening measures put onto that laptop or tablet. Now, when you're trying to connect back into your network using a VPN from a home computer, you may traditionally not have all the security measures. It's not uncommon to see home computers that are not even been patched for 2 or 3 years, right? And this opens yourself to a whole lot of risk. So in case the home network is compromised, the VPN gives the attacker or the malware complete access to your enterprise network, thereby bringing your entire enterprise into at risk. So this is one of the biggest challenges that you have with using a VPN. Now, recommended solution is always to use some sort of a bastion host where a user can connect using his home computer to this bastion host and then initiate a connection onto his enterprise, so that there is a level of security between an home computer and the remote user. And this is exactly what the Beyond Trust remote support and the privileged remote access provides.
All right, we have one question from Nisha. Her company just bought insurance as to mitigate any cyber attack. She's asking for your opinion on this.
So buying insurance is always good practice. I don't think I can say anything wrong with buying insurance, whether it's for personal or for enterprise. Always a good practice.
Right. Okay. We have one question coming in. Can secure remote access address vulnerability of employee home network, carrier router with default passwords?
Again, so like I said, one of the key mechanisms that our secured remote access solutions offer is, an ability to isolate your home network or your home user computer from your enterprise network. The connectivity as by user connecting, logging in onto our remote, secure remote access via a web browser, and then having complete visibility or access to all your enterprise tools or systems, based on his requirement. So this ensures that there's always a layer between a home computer or a home network and your enterprise. So anything that is, malware sitting on your home computer cannot jump into your enterprise network.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, so we also participant for this particular webinar. We can actually invite you onto the screen, and also if you'd like to share some of your best practices with all our participants, you also can as well. You just have to type in the chat, say, I'd like to be invited, I'd like to share something. Please go ahead as well. I have one question. So this is about your 90-day free offer. How many, okay, how many free remote user do we get to set up if we get the 90-day free offer?
Okay, so we allow around 5 users to connect back into the network for a period of 90 days. Again, like I mentioned, this is available both for on-prem as well as cloud. So the cloud variant is something that is much more popular.
All right. So we do have a poll here. I would like to invite everyone to basically just go to the poll and vote, or ask the questions if you still have any questions. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, do we have or not? Ajay, sorry. To close this particular webinar, what are the top 3 tips you will basically give all our participants today on managing their identity and access management?
Okay. Traditionally, managing identities is one, have a centralized repository. Second, use two-factor. Three, have an ability to securely inject or in a mechanism to inject credentials into our application rather than having to share passwords. So these would be the 3 quick tips that I would like to share today.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for today's presentations. Thank you everyone for joining this particular webinar. Again, sessions number 3, you're welcome to join as well, Ajay, if you have time, is our top 10 cybersecurity tips from working from home at 10:55. We will end here now. Thank you so much. Please give applause to Ajay. in chat, or basically say thank you to him. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining the session. Keep your hands and your devices clean.
And also make sure that you basically log on to the third sessions, ladies and gentlemen, at 10:55. We'll start the session. Log at 10:50. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.